Grandpa, why are you dressed so funny?
And where did you get that hat?
Today my name is not Grandpa, but Abram, a man who was called by God.
What does it mean to be called Grandpa? I mean, Abram.
Well, let me tell you a story about when God called me.
Okay,
we're ready to listen.
All right. Once upon a time, I lived with my family in a town called Haran. It was a busy place with lots and lots of camels and donkeys and horses. My father owned a trading business. Many cattle. But father was growing old, and so he asked me to take over the business.
Do you have a wife and lots of children, Mr. Abram?
Oh, no children, but a beautiful wife. Oh, Sarai, a very beautiful wife. All was going well until my father died. That same year, I heard the voice of God speaking to me.
God spoke to you? In his own voice?
Yes, Fanta. God called me by name. Abram, he said. Abram, I am calling your name and asking you to move from this country, from your people and from your father's household. I want you to travel with me to a land I will show you.
Wow! So God called you to go off on a journey right into the unknown. You told him no, didn't you?
Well, I did think a little bit about arguing with him, at least a little. But how can you argue with God when he himself stops by your house and talks to you like you would talk to one of your best friends? I listened, and I asked a lot of questions.
Questions? Does God answer your questions too?
Well, actually, Fanta, he kind of ignored my questions and told me more about what he wanted me to do. He said that he was asking me to go on this trip. He was going to make me into a great nation, he said, and that he was going to bless me and my family in ways that would be a blessing to all the other people who lived on earth.
All the people of the earth would be blessed by you?
That's what he said, and all the people of the earth will be blessed by you.
What did your wife Sarai say? Was she excited about moving?
Oh, not at all. She had so many friends and wanted to stay right there in Haran.
So what did you do? Go on the journey alone? Or did you convince her to come along?
Well, when I explained that it was God himself who was doing the asking, Sarai, my wife, offered to start packing. She believed, and that was it. In just a few weeks, we had sold the business and started off following God. All the people we had collected in Haran, including my nephew Lot, his family, it made a pretty large caravan heading toward the land that would be our new home.
Did God give you a map or a cool GPS?
No map, no GPS. When God calls, he never provides a map. Just the promise that he will go with you and show you where to go.
That's a pretty awesome promise. It's kind of like being blindfolded and spun around several times and then told to walk across the room without bumping into something. I'd be afraid.
We did that once at school. When I was blindfolded and walked all alone, I ran into a desk. Ow! And then one of my friends held my hand. I did just fine.
Did you have any other adventures?
Oh, it's pretty important to have someone hold your hand. But even when you're following God, you'll have to do some pretty scary adventures. On our trip, we met robbers. We ran out of water, had to dig a well, and we lost some animals before we finally felt we were where God wanted us to be.
Where did God take you?
All the way to a place you know today as Israel. We called it the land of Canaan. It was like a land flowing with milk and honey. It had everything a family would want. But then the rain stopped. Our crops died. And we were all hungry, very hungry.
What did you eat? And what about your animals? What did they eat? Potatoes? Seems like potatoes are okay even when they're wrinkled.
Did you carry a lot of seeds and food in your luggage?
Let me tell you about our luggage. We took lots of dried food, many different kinds of seeds, barley, wheat, grass, all the things that we could grow to feed our animals. And we took plants, all wrapped tightly in cloth so that they'd stay alive until we could plant them in God's new land. Also, we took cloth and hides for our tents. We took cooking kettles and clothes for cold and hot weather, and head coverings to keep the sun from burning our heads and the rain from washing us away, like my hat.
Tell us one of your adventures.
Well, one year there was a horrible drought in our new land.
What did you do when the drought came?
We went south, down to the country of Egypt. I had heard that there was food growing along the Nile River.
Did you enjoy that trip?
For a while, until the king, they call him Pharaoh, decided he wanted to carry off my wife Sarai as his wife. She was just too beautiful. Wah! If God hadn't rescued us from Pharaoh, my, oh my, I'm not sure what would have happened. Oh, and then there was the time we had to go to war.
To war? Did you have guns and tanks?
No guns, no tanks. But by then I had 300 servants. They were all trained as soldiers, and they knew how to use bows and arrows and swords. And several kings from nearby towns came into our camp and kidnapped my nephew Lot and his family. And when we heard the news, I called all 300 of my servants, and we rode off to rescue Lot.
Did you win? I would have helped. I have a bow and arrow.
Oh, it would have been lovely to have you helping, Fanta. God used us to win the war, and we were able to bring everyone home, along with all the cattle and other things the enemy had stolen.
When you're following God, you can do almost anything, right? And what was your most favorite adventure?
Oh, remember that I told you God promised to make me a great nation? Well, Sarah and I still hadn't had any children, and I was almost 100 years ancient.
You're 100 years old.
Ooh, that's a little late to start a family, don't you think?
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then one day, several men came up to our tent. And when their leader spoke, I thought his voice sounded familiar, like God had sounded many years ago back in Haran. He told me that Sarah and I were going to have a baby boy, and that his name should be Isaac. Then he said that since we were now going to be starting a great nation, both of us needed new names. He said I would be called Abraham, and Sarai would now be called Sarah.
You were 100 years old?
Mm-hmm. And Sarah was 90 when baby Isaac was born.
I wish I could have come to that celebration.
Mr. Abraham. I guess I should call you Father Abraham. You've sure had a life full of adventures with God. Can I have that kind of life too?
Fanta and Wendy, God calls each of you, just like he called me and Sarah. He has a plan for each of us, and he's eager to lead us on a life journey filled with adventures. Oh, and by the way, no matter how hard the enemy tries to give us trouble, God makes sure we always get the victory.